Good afternoon. I'm Dan Moore. I'm the Assisted Living Transition Counselor here at RiverMe.
And I'm Jennifer Coles, the Director of Marketing and Community Relations. Welcome to our program, The 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's. We appreciate you joining us today. Please reach out to us if you need any additional information or resources. We are so pleased to be able to bring you this program, The 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's, given by Anne Romney from the Alzheimer's Association. With me today, we also have Dan Moore. His role here at RiverMe is to counsel folks about assisted living and memory support at RiverMe. He gives tours and provides information and resources to people. Also on our presentation today is Melissa, the Regional Manager of the State of New Hampshire Alzheimer's Association. Because some of you are new to RiverMe, I want to give you a quick overview of our community. RiverMe is a life plan community offering a continuum of care, independent living, as well as assisted living and memory care and nursing care. We have 2 campuses here, the Mead and the Village, on our 96 acres, and we have 300 residents. Our life plan is a contract, so you enter in and pay an entrance fee and monthly service fees. Our assisted and memory support neighborhoods are specially designed to foster independence and wellness in a home-like setting, giving our residents and their families peace of mind.
Hi, my name is Dan Moore. I'm the Assisted Living Transition Counselor here at RiverMe. Before we dive into our program of the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about RiverMe and some of the things that make RiverMe different. You can see on the slide we have a wide range of amenities and services that are available to assisted living residents. But some of the things that truly set us apart are the fully staffed nursing care that's available 24/7 with an on-site nurse in each assisted living neighborhood. Again, along with that, the comprehensive nursing care is part of our inclusive pricing structure, which means as your loved one progresses down the continuum of care and may require more assistance, you will not be billed additional nursing charges. Another highlight of RiverMe is our exceptional life enrichment team, which offers programming to meet all levels of care. In our memory support neighborhood, we have immediate availability. All of the memory support studios are private suites. Everyone has access to that exceptional resident-centered programming. Again, we have extremely well-trained staff, especially in the area of dementia care. And with our life enrichment programs, we take pride in the ability of getting people out of their rooms and participating in meaningful engagement. We hear from families all the time about how happy they are that they made the choice to place their loved ones here at RiverMe. From our caring staff who goes out of their way to make sure they know every resident, to the residents themselves who form long-lasting bonds and enjoy doing all the activities and programming opportunities together. So along with the 10 warning signs that you're going to hear about coming up, we have a few tips here to support your loved one during this transition time. And from RiverMe's perspective, the last 3 are definitely the most important. You want to make the move, and the sooner the better. If you move at a time of crisis, it can always become much more difficult for everyone involved. Again, it's a very difficult discussion, so resistance, expect it. You're gonna face it, but you can push through it. And then finally, once they are placed, understand that there is a transition period, but once they do adjust, they will be very happy in their new surroundings. So now I'm going to turn it over to Romney of the Alzheimer's Association. She has been a volunteer presenter for both Maine and New Hampshire Mass chapters for the past 12 years, and we are delighted to have her here today to discuss this very important topic.
I'm very glad to be here today along with Melissa Grenier, who is the regional manager for the New Hampshire chapter, community involvement. And this is one of our very basic fundamental programs. We have many programs, and at the end of the presentation, I'll just do a quick overview of all the things that the Alzheimer's Association has to offer, always free, and we have support groups and a great website and all these kinds of programs. So I'm very happy to be able to present this program today. Are you hearing me well? Yes, great, great. And I just also want to say, having just watched the opening, that I can only solidly endorse this type of facility that you have. My own parents lived in a similar type of place in the New York area for many years during the last decade of their life. And yes, there was resistance. And yes, we didn't get there as soon as they should have. But once they settled in, it was just a wonderful, wonderful, positive experience for everyone, including my brother and I, who could sigh a relief that they were in a wonderful place being taken care of. So absolutely thumbs up for the type of place that RiverMe is, and thanks for having us here. I do have a presentation to share, and I'm hoping that you can all see this. And there are a few videos as well, so we'll hopefully you'll be able to hear those. And I'm going to move right through the material, but I can't see the chat or the questions, but Melissa is here, and if you, I am fine to stop along the way. We will certainly take questions at the end, but if somebody has something that pops up right along the way, we're not such a large group that we can't take time to do that, so we will. And I'm just going to speak through the material here. Let me just make sure I can see everything on my own screen. The objectives for this short program is we want to talk about the typical age-related changes that happen with memory, thinking, and the behavioral changes. So there are typical things that we all experience to some degree, and then there are things that are warning signs of Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And we're going to talk about those. We want to talk about some tips for approaching someone about memory concerns. I think you had a program coming up around conversations. It's very challenging often to broach these topics, but very, very important that you do. And we're strong advocates of earlier the better, and having these conversations and learning what's happening. Talk about early detection also and the benefits of early diagnosis. We'll talk about the possible tests and assessments for understanding that diagnosis. And then as I mentioned, we will talk about the resources that are available through the Alzheimer's Association. So we're going to look through the experience of the Garcia family, a mom and her 2 adult daughters. So we have Mary, who is a 73-year-old widow. She's living alone. She's a retired teacher, and she's always been meticulous in her care for her home. Everything's very orderly. And her daughter Lydia has been noticing piles of laundry, junk mail, and old newspapers, things that are not characteristic of Lydia. We have, of Mary. Lydia is the eldest daughter of Mary's 2 daughters, and she lives very close by. So she's right there, and she sees her mom often. And then we have her other daughter who is further away. And they're having a little texting conversation here. Worried about mom, she keeps losing things and the house is a mess. Probably normal to get a little forgetful with age. It's so unlike her, should we be worrying? Well, let's reach out to our neighbor. They are very lucky to have their neighbor be an expert in dementia.
As we get older, cognitive problems become more noticeable for almost everybody, and it can vary from person to person. Typically with age, people have trouble coming up with the word they want right when they want it. They have trouble remembering names, and they don't think quite as quickly. What's more concerning, or what might be the beginning of a memory problem, is people have a lot of trouble coming up with words or names, and it's happening more frequently, and the words or names don't necessarily come to them later. and then they start misplacing things, but not just once in a while, because we all misplace things, but more often. And it begins to interfere day to day. That should be a warning sign for people that this might be the beginning of a memory problem.
Yeah, as we move through these different 10 warning signs, that's really a critical point that he made around, is it interfering with the daily life of that individual? And that's a particularly important piece that we need to pay attention to. So we're going to jump right into the material around these different warning signs. We're going to hear from a number of experts.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So we often get the question, well, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? And really what we now know is that Alzheimer's is just the most common form under that umbrella of dementias. I'm going to hear from another.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So the takeaway here is that it is more than just a memory type of disease, but the disease affects executive functioning skills, thinking, planning, and different personalities and different behaviors as well.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things, but when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with. Some of the things that can look like Alzheimer's may be other treatable conditions. If it is Alzheimer's, you still want to know as early as possible, because that gives the person and the family time to plan, time to make decisions, and it also gives the person with the disease a voice and allows them to say what they want.
Which is, again, such an important piece around early detection, early conversations, really finding out what's going on. It's important to acknowledge that it isn't necessarily easy to have those kinds of conversations, but so important to be able to get on top of the things you can be on top of. So we can't change the trajectory of the disease itself, but there are a lot of things that we can do to accommodate, plan, and take care of all sorts of different issues that come up. So now we're going to walk through the different signs, the early warning signs, and we're going to compare each of those with what would be a typical age-related change in that way. So memory loss that disrupts your daily life. One of the most common signs of Alzheimer's is forgetting recently learned information. So a person may remember something from way long ago, a phone number from when they were 10, but not remember who they spoke with earlier that day. So it could be including forgetting important dates or events, asking the same question over and over again. We know that that's a hallmark of people that have dementias, that repetition, or relying increasingly on memory aids, notes, or family members to tell them and remind them for things that they normally were able to take care of on their own. What it would be a typical age-related change in this regard is sometimes we forget names or appointments, but then we connect the dots and we can remember where we might have put our keys or that, oh, we were supposed to go to an appointment. So that would be the difference there. And the next warning sign is challenges in planning or problem solving. So I mentioned executive functioning skills, the ability to plan a day and to take care of different problems that you might be encountering. This might happen, a person might have a hard time following working with numbers or following just even an agenda or a schedule for their day. Could be something like a familiar recipe that they've always been able to do and no longer can seem to do, keeping track of monthly bills, financial management and things of that sort often are impacted rather early, can be one of the earlier warning signs. They might have difficulty concentrating and taking much longer to complete a familiar task. What would be typical of an age-related change in this regard is the occasional errors we all make when we're paying our bills or managing our finances. We're going to hear from a number of individuals in this program, and these are not actors. These are people who are living with Alzheimer's diagnosis and are able to talk about it, which is so helpful for all of us to be able to hear from them.
I was probably spending 4 to 5 times more time preparing for something than I did, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because of I would lose my thought, I'd lose my focus, I'd get anxious, I wouldn't get to sleep. I was thinking that was in my sleep. I was thinking about what I was anxious about, which was what I was trying to remember, which was what I was trying to prepare, which I was trying to do. So it was really a vicious circle of. So I was able to control it a lot, so that people on me wouldn't see things, and there weren't things to be seen. It's what was disturbing me was what effort I had to put into to do the things I used to do more easily.
You can see how exhausting that is. And another word just around the folks that are able to talk about this, they're roughly 50% of the people that have a diagnosis of dementia, Alzheimer's, are aware of it and able to talk about it and recognize these changes that are happening for them. There's another half, and my dad unfortunately was one of those in that camp, who had Alzheimer's but never once acknowledged that this was happening. So it's harder if a person doesn't talk about it. We don't know if it's denial or actually the way the disease impacts the brain, but it indeed makes it harder to know what they need and want and how you can help them. We're going to move on to the next one. Already did this one. Difficulty completing familiar tasks. This is something that we often see, and it can be something like driving to a familiar location. And I think driving is a whole subtopic that needs a lot of conversation and understanding because it's obviously a very risky and problematic loss if people can no longer drive, and all of that is impacted there. But driving shows up fairly early often, organizing a grocery list, remembering the rules, even just playing a game and not being able to do that. These are some of the kinds of things that you might observe. And we all typically can need some help doing something like a microwave or recording something. We haven't done it very often. But again, it's something that's happening to the degree where it's impacting your daily life.
Some people have difficulty with math or with reading in a way that's unusual to them. And once again, this is a change in that person. So for example, we all know somebody who was never able to balance their checkbook, right? So that wouldn't be a warning sign for them. But if somebody who always balanced their checkbook to the penny suddenly was paying bills, the same bill over and over, and not able to balance their finances, well, that would be a sign for them.
Right, so it's that change. That's what's really important there. Is it a new behavior that you had not recognized before? This fourth one, confusion with time or place. This is again something that is something we see often. People can lose track of the date, what time it is, even where exactly they are. They may think they're in a different state or a different location, and generally have trouble understanding if something is not happening right there, right now. And forget perhaps how they, where they are, but how they got to be where they are. We all have some confusion sometimes. What day is this? Monday? Is this Friday? But we typically can figure it out later. We're going to go to this next one.
Alzheimer's disease is not just...
I have a trigger sharp mouse. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. This is really an important one, and this is where places that have residential memory care kinds of facilities have really advanced what they know around this and able to accommodate some of these visual image and spatial kinds of things by signage and a variety of things. But some people have vision problems, and that can sometimes be where you start to understand that there is an underlying dementia-related problem. It can affect people's ability to be well balanced. It can affect their ability to read, sometimes judging distance, determining color or contrast. And that is again where we start to worry about the driving. You may start to notice little dents or things in the car, or the person isn't coming to a full stop at a traffic light. So those are the kinds of things to be really keenly tuned into and be aware of. Now, we all have some of us age and have vision changes. That would not be something we would immediately associate with dementia.
Alzheimer's disease is not just a disease of memory. It can affect other things too. It can affect the way that we perceive what we see. So sometimes somebody in the early stages of Alzheimer's might go to the eye doctor because they're having trouble seeing, and in fact, their vision is just fine, but the way they're perceiving what they're seeing may be difficult.
So again, it's another good reason to always stay up current with your health exams and any kind of thing that's coming up. Really important to check it out. The sixth warning sign is new problems with words in speaking or writing. People may have a problem following a conversation, so you start to see some withdrawal, some personality changes going on there. They might stop in the middle of a conversation and really be lost. How do I continue? Where was I? That repetition again, struggling to find that right word. Maybe trouble naming a familiar object or using the wrong name. So the example I like to give is somebody may point to their watch. They may know that it's something to do with time and say that my time thing isn't working. They're forgetting the name of watch at that particular moment. So we'll listen to Phil discuss his challenge with words.
The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
So we can understand again the frustration, which I think is something that is a piece of this throughout all of these different signs, is that people are struggling to figure out. They're trying to understand what's happening to them. You're trying to understand what might be happening. It's very challenging. The seventh warning sign is this misplacing of things and losing the ability to retrace the steps. And that's the clincher, because we all put down our phone somewhere and we're not sure where we put it, or our keys, or something we were writing with, or we usually are able to regroup and figure it out. But a person who is having a form of dementia may not be able to connect those dots. So that person might lose things, be unable to go back through the steps. They may also even accuse others of stealing because they can't imagine that it could have gone missing, and they have no explanation for why it has gone missing. Typically, we all misplace things, and then we are able to generally find them.
So some people wonder if they lose their keys or their glasses or their purse, is that a sign of Alzheimer's? And one thing that I would say about that is, for most of us, we might misplace something, but then if we retrace our steps, we can usually find it. We can usually remember. For a person with Alzheimer's, sometimes they're not able to retrace their steps. Sometimes that memory is just gone. And so when they do find their keys next to the phone because they got interrupted by a phone call when they were coming in, and they set their keys down in an unusual space, so there they are next to the phone. If that happened to you or me, we'd probably remember, oh yeah, the phone was ringing when I came in the door. I put down my keys. The person with Alzheimer's might not remember. They might wonder who's moving their keys around because they never put their keys by the phone. So that's just a little bit of a difference in some of the dynamics with losing things in Alzheimer's.
Yeah, something I want to just interject here too is that earlier in an earlier slide, there was reference to the fact that the dementia actually, the Alzheimer's actually causes a diminishment in the size of the brain. It can literally, in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, the brain can be literally 1/3 less large than it was originally. I share this because there really are physiological changes that are happening. And sometimes we get impatient with someone. We think, well, of course they're going to remember this. They must know where they put their keys. And we get a bit impatient because we just don't see that there's something really physiological happening. But indeed, there really is. And I think it's important for us to recognize that that's a piece of what's happening and it's not something the person can control. Particularly early on, people look exactly as they always have. So we don't understand how this could be happening. Number 8, decreased or poor judgment. People living with Alzheimer's can have changes in their judgment or decision making, which could mean poor judgment when they're dealing with money. And we have a program on the impact of Alzheimer's on finances. And one of the things we have to be aware of are scams and fraud. And a person with dementia is more vulnerable to these types of things, someone that calls and asks for credit card information. So we have to make sure we're monitoring and being aware of that. And a person may also pay less attention to their grooming, their own self-grooming, or keeping themselves tidy and neat as they might have always done. So that's something to notice. That's a change that you might observe. We all typically make bad decisions once in a while, like we forget to change the oil in our car or many, many other kinds of things, but usually they're one-off and not a pattern that's interrupting our daily life.
The way I kept my house, and all of a sudden, everything was okay with me. It's like, oh, it's a pile, I'm tired. So my dining room table usually looked like it was someone's office, because I always would say I would do it tomorrow. And then my bedroom, as far as clothing, I would just put it in a corner, put it in a chair. And all of this is just, I wouldn't say it looked like I was a pet wreck, but really I was, because I never threw anything away. I always would say, I'll get to it, but I never did get to it. So just the way of my standard of living, it was actually decreasing.
So in this case, it's a change. She's someone that was always neat, and now her home was not, she had stopped caring in that regard. Withdrawal from work or social activities. So we know that there are personality changes that happen, and some of it makes a lot of sense when you think about how vulnerable a person feels when they are not as sharp as they have been, and they are concerned whether they'll remember to say the right thing or do the right thing. So we do see a withdrawal. A person may have lost the ability to really follow a conversation, which is why we suggest keeping things calm and slow when you're having a conversation and trying to avoid lots of external distractions. But a person may lose interest in their hobbies or other ways in which they stay connected with other people. Then they become isolated, which brings even more challenge to the situation. They have trouble keeping up with their favorite sport or their activity. We all go typically through periods of being more or less engaged, but this again is something that develops into a pattern.
One of the most common changes, and early on, is the person's comfort zone shrinks a little bit, and then that gets worse throughout the course of the illness. So they're less comfortable going out, they're less motivated to do things than they were in the past. So there's some change in day-to-day functioning that way. I think people also lose confidence in their cognitive abilities because they may not recognize someone or know their name or find the right word, and they'll feel awkward, and they don't want people to notice that, so they feel more comfortable at home or in situations with family where they're very, very comfortable with that wouldn't concern them. So people tend to withdraw a little bit and be less outgoing. That's can be one of the early signs of Alzheimer's.
And one of the things we encourage people to do in those early stages when you're just figuring this out is ask the person whether they want you to help figure out who the name of that person is, or help prompt them for the word that they may be struggling to get. And they may be very receptive to your help, or they may say, no, I need to figure it out on my own. So it's another piece of that early period of time where you can have an impact as someone supporting someone who's going through all of this. The 10th warning sign is changes in mood and personality, which we've already been touching on a little bit, but a person may become confused or suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. They may get easily upset at home with friends, or when they're in a new place where they're outside of their comfort zone. So we, as people caring for people that may be experiencing this, we can be very reassuring and supportive if a person's feeling this way. Now, we all have our irritable days, but again, it's that pattern.
Another early sign of Alzheimer's or dementia is subtle changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, the family may notice the person is more easily irritated, or more impatient, or a little moody, or have a shorter fuse, or more anxious. Now, there's lots of things that can cause that, but often that can be an early symptom of Alzheimer's or go along with the early symptoms of memory loss.
And so just to capture them all for you in one place, these are the 10 warning signs. And it's never that somebody would necessarily have all of these things, but it's a bit of a puzzle early on when you start to try to figure out what's happening and how many of these different things are at play for an individual, and it might change over time as things progress. But if you are noticing any of these signs to any significant degree in yourself or in someone else, it is important not to ignore it and to get a workup and find out what's happening. So we're going to return into the family, the Garcias, and how they went about interpreting the signs and deciding what to do. So they're having the daughters are having this little texting communication again. Did you look at the warning signs I did, but I still don't know. Mom's showing a couple signs, not all the time. How do we know if it's serious enough to see a doctor? And we're going to hear again from Dr. Salloway.
Memory is not all or none, especially when there are early symptoms or signs. So on a good day, people might function very well and not really even, no one notices there's a memory problem. But on other days, especially if they're tired, then things become more noticeable. So memory is variable. It's not all or none. And then there are different type of symptoms that develop for each person. So some people may have trouble with language, may have trouble with organizing themselves, may have trouble navigating while driving, and other people don't have the same symptoms. So you don't have to have every symptom of Alzheimer's to be concerned. And I think the most important thing is determining what has changed from that person's normal level of functioning. And usually people have a pretty keen sense of, what they can normally do well. And then when either they or the family notice that there has been some change from that usual pattern of functioning, that should be a warning sign to people. But they don't have to check off all the boxes.
Right, and early on it's sensitive, and people are often fearful of this kind of diagnosis, and that's certainly understandable. So just in terms of recapping, the 10 signs are a guide to identifying problems that may be related to Alzheimer's. They could be related to other things. Individuals may experience one or multiple warning signs in varying degrees. It's very individual, but they don't have to experience them all for there to be a concern. And if you notice these in yourself or in someone else, it is important to get it checked out. So we're going to, I've already mentioned how important we consider early detection to be, but we're going to hear from a couple of experts.
It's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, in more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot, and the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it, and they say, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. And they say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
Right, so we don't know how much is denial and how much is truly not being aware of it.
I was so adamant about what was happening to Daryl. I wasn't sure. I didn't know. And this wasn't the person that I know. This wasn't the person. Daryl was my husband was very, he always had to be building or designing or working with his hands. And it was getting to the point where he wasn't, and he was becoming very frustrated when he was forgetting to do things or go places.
So we have, let me get to the next slide. We have a 10-step approach to how you would go about assessing the situation if this is something that you feel is happening in your someone you know or in terms of yourself. The first thing is to really observe what changes in the memory, thinking, or behavior do you see, and it's really important to actually keep track of those things so that when you do get into a medical professional, you have a record of what these things are. Observe what else might be going on. There could be other reasons that a person's experiencing some of these things. And is there some stressor going on? Is there some other kind of illness happening? So it's important to take in the more complete picture. Do what you're doing today, which is learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. That's really an important piece to understanding how to assess the situation. Learn about the benefits, learn about the signs and the benefits of early diagnosis. Check in with other people, friends, family members, neighbors. Have other people observed these things. Do a little reality check with other people. And that's important that we do that and that we don't let the stigma or the fear get in our way of really checking this out and learning what we can about what's happening. Having a conversation, this is really an important piece. It's very hard to broach this topic. We want people to be able to be thoughtful about it and to be prepared for it and to pick the time and place that you would have a conversation. And it wouldn't, if I could edit this slide, I would put an S after conversation because it's not a one and done. It's something that needs to happen over time. And sometimes people get tired or there's a lot of resistance, so you need to table it and return to it at another point in time. So as I said, knowing what the best time and place, it should be something when people have time and it's not feeling rushed, when you have time, when the person you're speaking to has time and is relaxed. Think about what you will be saying or another person will be saying in terms of this conversation. Where is it going, and how prepared are you to have the conversation? If there's the logical step would be there would be a medical appointment that you would go to a physician to get an assessment or diagnosis, but you can offer to go with that person and you can combine it with something nice, like go out for lunch and not just make it be a doctor's appointment because you will get resistance. We often see that there's significant resistance. And as I already said, if needed, and I think it would always be needed to have multiple conversations about this. Also really important to reach out for support. My mantra in every program that we get involved with is that this is not something that people can do all by themselves. It's really important to have community, to have a team, to have support from family members, professionals, places like the Alzheimer's Association, programs that RiverMe and places like this offer people. It's so important that you don't do all the heavy lifting on your own. It's really, really hard to do that. So really important to know what the resources are out there and how you can access them. We'll make sure that you know about those. Seeing a doctor is certainly a starting point in terms of getting any kind of an assessment or workup. And people typically start with their primary care physician. And I think primary care docs are getting better and better at sort of understanding some of these basic things. But sometimes you will be referred to a specialist for further evaluation, and they may be any of the One's listed here: a geriatrician, neurologist, a neuropsychologist, a psychiatrist, or psychologist. So it very well move on to a higher level of workup. This early detection piece that we keep talking about, we're going to talk about why it's so important.
There are a number of benefits in early detection of Alzheimer's. For one thing, a person is able to have a voice in what happens next. They can make plans. They can live life more on their own terms. They can also make plans for the future, financial plans, care plans. They can let people know what they want, which can be a real gift later on. It also allows time for families to make plans and to make decisions about who can do what and figure out care and those kinds of issues. Some people are interested in clinical trials. Clinical trials allow people to have access to treatments that aren't available yet. And for some people, that can be a really important thing to pursue.
So lots of benefits there, and just overall planning and preparedness, really important. There are legal documents, financial planning, all kinds of things that people need to attend to when there's a diagnosis such as this. So just to recap the early detection, pay attention to those changes, write them down, observe them, check in with other people to see if they're observing them as well. If you see the changes that are unusual, have that conversation or the beginning of the conversations. Discuss these different types of concerns. It can be very difficult. Consider using the 10-step approach that we had here. And I think there's a handout that can probably be gotten to most of you that have those 10 steps. And there's just a number of benefits to this early detection, including the opportunity to plan for the future, possibly take part in a trial or a clinical study. And in terms of what it looks like in getting a diagnosis, we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to start with just a couple of questions. True or false? There's currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease, and that is actually false. There are a number of assessments and tests that make it possible for professionals to diagnose Alzheimer's with a very high degree of certainty. Here are some of the possible assessments and tests that may include, of course, just a regular medical exam, a physical exam. There could be screening for depression, an interview with a close companion. Some of the testing might include laboratory tests, cognitive functioning tests, could be brain imaging, or spinal fluid analysis as well. And do dementia-like symptoms always result in a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another dementia? And that is no. So we have, again, the conversation via text. The appointments have been going well. Mom's handling them okay. Do we think it's really dementia? Guess we won't know until we get a diagnosis, but let's check in again with Dr. Salloway.
Someone could have high blood pressure that's out of control, or they might have a thyroid condition that's not regulated, or diabetes that's not right, or on a medication that actually can cause memory loss. Drinking too much alcohol can make memory worse. So there are a lot of factors that go into cognitive difficulty with aging that some of them can be remedied. And so we want to do everything we can to improve cognitive ability and quality of life.
Yeah, again, we only can find that out if we do that early assessment. So in terms of this diagnosis, the experience varies from person to person. Something other than Alzheimer's or another dementia could be causing the symptoms. And the stigma and misconceptions about the disease, like believing that nothing can be done, can prevent some people from seeking a diagnosis. We want to move away from that myth. So what happens next when there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's? We have another texting conversation here. Let's see if we can get that to play in here. I called but got your voicemail. How did it go? I'll call you later when I get home, but the diagnosis is early stage Alzheimer's. Oh no, what do we do now? The doc says that Alzheimer's offers free resources. Some even help people live well with the disease. will call soon but left the office with some hope, which is really is important because there's a whole lot going on in terms of support and help. The Alzheimer's is a nationwide. I'm going to just move through that that slide, but we do have several ways of accessing our resources. We have a 24/7 helpline, which is the people who answer those calls are trained professional social workers, and we're going to hear from Tim, who's a care partner, and how he's used the helpline.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center when I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
And so the calls can be for something emergent, like a situation that's happening that's feeling frightening at that very moment, or it can be really far-reaching around where do I get support groups, or how do I learn about residential programs in my area. It can be anything on the whole continuum of how to deal with or understand these challenges. We also have an excellent website, alz.org.
When I went to the Alzheimer's Association website, which is alz.org, there I was trying to find out more about what was Alzheimer's, what really is this disease, what is younger onset Alzheimer's, what is dementia, is there a cure, how long has it been around, how many people are affected by this? Where can I go for resources? Where can I go for help? What do I do with this? How can I handle this? Is there more people like me out there? Is there someone that I can talk to if I need to? And there I found the support line that's 24 hours a day. And there I found where I can go for workshops, where I can go and read things and postings that people have done, where I can find out what events is happening in the Alzheimer's Association, where I can see how it's affecting people around the globe.
So really important to be aware of these resources and to let other people know as well. And then we'll hear.
Since I've been
from Tom.
diagnosed with dementia, the one place that I know I can go to for assistance and help and support is to the Alzheimer's Association. There are people there that I know by name that I can contact if I'm having a difficult time, or if I'm struggling to find some resource, that they will provide that to me.
Good to know about all of our resources. We also have the walk, which I think you're all very, very familiar with, and that is the way for getting engaged to really, that is our largest fundraising event, the Walk for Alzheimer's, that typically happens in the fall, and we are grateful for the support for all of you who get involved with that. There are some other ways that you can get involved. There's volunteering, which is something that I'm doing here right now, but there are lots of different ways in which people can get involved, and it's a great organization to be involved with. There's advocacy for the legislation that is always out there on the state and federal level to fight for the support that's needed and the funding that the research and the resources require. You've already heard about the Trial Match program. This is a wonderful program that people who have a particular thing happening to them might match with it could be a pharmaceutical trial, but can also be a lifestyle program as well, because we know that nutrition and social engagement and exercise, there are all kinds of ways which people can work to keep this at bay. And so they have matches that are not just pharmaceutical matches. We've talked about the walk to end Alzheimer's. And then we also have another fundraiser that happens on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. And it's kind of a do-it-yourself fundraising event where you might go hiking or baking or dancing. You just get people to sponsor and be aware of that. And so you're bringing attention to and raising money. And it's done broadly around the country, as well as our walk in the fall. So that is the formal part of the presentation, and I'm more than happy to, if there are any questions. I haven't really looked into the chat, so I don't know. If people have questions, you can just unmute and ask a question. Yes.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, Dick.
My name is Dick. I am a resident here at RiverMe. At the beginning of your presentation, you indicated that Alzheimer's was under the overall umbrella of dementia, and there were 4 or 5 other types of dementia. Is Alzheimer's the most common one? Is it the majority, the 80-90%? And are there some specific signs of other types of dementia that might indicate that it's not Alzheimer's, that it's something else?
That's a great question, and I'm not a medical person, so I'll do it my best, and Melissa maybe might jump in as well. It isn't indeed the most common form. Alzheimer's is, I don't know what the percent is, and maybe someone here does know, but is definitely the most common form. There are some other dementias that have sort of a physical manifestation to them. I believe it's the Lewy bodies dementia that might affect people in the sort of Parkinson related world, but if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me. And so you might see sometimes those are misdiagnosed. Parkinson's and Lewy bodies dementia get confused in terms of that early workup, in terms of the proper diagnosis. So there's that has a unique thing. There's one of the dementias that also has often a personality aspect to it, where somebody might experience a lot of anger or personality changes, and that's the first thing that shows up, is that the person's just not acting like themselves, and so that would be a warning flag. That doesn't typically happen with what we consider Alzheimer's disease. It doesn't usually manifest initially with that personality change, but that happens with some of the other dementias. Melissa, is something you can add here that would clarify to that question?
No, I think each type of dementia, they have overlapping symptoms. However, there are unique features, like Anne was mentioning. And Anne, you have that absolutely correct. Frontotemporal dementia is probably the one that you're thinking of when it comes to kind of uninhibited behavior, sudden changes in mood and personality, and happens in younger males in their 50s typically. Alzheimer's disease accounts for over 60% of all dementias. So that's why, and probably even more than that actually, but I'm just being conservative. That's the lower end of our number. And so, yeah, I think that's why we end up using Alzheimer's and dementia interchangeably, although there is a finite difference. And we don't have enough time to go through all the types of dementia. I mean, there are like 20 to 30 different types of dementias, or maybe more. So, Anne touched on, and our presentations typically touch on the more common ones.
And then there's this phenomena of mixed dementias, which I
Yes.
understand is not uncommon for people to have more than
Correct.
one specific type of dementia.
That's great. Thank you. And by the way, I think your presentation is good, and the way you just differentiate between this dementia versus what's normal was very helpful as well. And I've been in touch with Melissa offline directly. I'm going to follow up with her on a couple of other things. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the question, Dick. Thank you. And anyone else have a question or comment? Just something that you've experienced. Doesn't have to be a question. Just we're all learning from each other when we do these. So if someone has something that you've run into or experienced or wondering about.
Well,
Anne?
I can make a comment. Working in the Concord Hospital, I was introduced to the more short-term dementia that you want to watch for. Somebody has a fever or something like that, and you go, oh, well, they're just tired. But actually get right in there and do some intervention so it won't become more permanent, like really having some routine or going ahead and having some lights on or some drink and stuff like that can be very helpful in a preventative sort of way. But that's really a sort of a different subject.
But it's an important one because it's tied up in that whole early, what you're trying to figure out what's going on piece. And they're real. I mean, people can get a urinary tract infection and get very, very confused and be really seeming like they have some serious cognitive decline. When the ship gets righted and they get treated, they can go back to their baseline. So I think we do need to keep our minds open to the fact that it can be other things, and not let the fear of trying to find out what it is get in the way of finding out, because it could be something treatable.
And I just want to give a shout out to Concord Hospital because they have their delirium protocol, which I think, Anne, is probably what you're referring to. So they have a really great way of differentiating when someone gets to the hospital, differentiating between dementia, which is sort of a slow and insidious, set of symptoms, versus that quick onset, like you were mentioning, Anne. Usually that comes from an infection or another urgent medical condition. And they're doing some really fantastic stuff at Concord Hospital that I think will be replicated in other facilities, in the future. But anyway, just that resonated with me, Anne. So just wanted to give your hospital a little shout out there. They're doing good things. So.
And typically things don't happen overnight. With the changes that you see with Alzheimer's diseases are not things that happen from one day to the next. So if something does happen abruptly, that really is a flag to go get some medical check, because that is not usually how things evolve in this.
And there was another question in the chat. And then maybe Chelsea, you wanted to say a few words about the walk, I think. So Anne, Jen was asking what advice you might have for someone who's struggling to accept changes in their loved one. So I think we're talking about the caregiver at this point, and maybe the caregiver is avoiding seeking help or placing their loved one in maybe a residential setting.
It's a huge question, and we are as concerned about the caregivers really as we are the people that are experiencing these diseases, because it's a huge stressor, and people are often dealing with their own fears and their own sense of stigma or not wanting to have this be real. So there's denial, there's fear, there are all kinds of things. We so encourage people to talk to other people. We have support groups that are in person and online, so people can really easily access these opportunities to talk about those fears and that resistance and all the things that get in the way of our being the best caregiver we can be. And it's absolutely challenging. There's no way to sugarcoat it. I think just getting support and getting knowledge, getting information, and realizing that this is a tsunami. I mean, that you're not alone, that there are so many people experiencing this kind of challenge, as age is still the greatest risk factor. So as we get better about living longer, we're seeing more and more and more dementia. So more and more people need support and information, and it's out there.
Great. Thank you, Anne. Good questions.
Hi, everyone. My name's Chelsea. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Walk to End Alzheimer's. I know Anne touched upon it. I am the Western New Hampshire walk manager. So for the Monadnock region, that kind of covers that area. Our walk is held in Keene at Keene State College. We take a very beautiful 2-mile scenic walk right down Main Street, and we come back. So the Walk to End Alzheimer's is the largest fundraising event in the world for Alzheimer's. And the funds that are raised from our walk go to 3 buckets, if you will. Care and support, which Anne talked a lot about our resources. So that goes to help funding our care consultations, our 24/7 helpline, all of that sort of thing. Research is the second one. We are the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research in the world. And then our third is advocacy. So the walk is a big thing in funding and helping. So if you would like to get involved, our walk is going to be on Saturday, October 5th of this year at Keene State College. And as Anne is a volunteer, we also have a volunteer committee. So if anybody is interested in joining our committee or helping day of, then please let me know, and we can get you involved. So I think that's really it for the walk, and I'll turn it back to the RiverMe team.